Moira Dingle from Emmerdale found herself pulled into an unexpected and increasingly uncomfortable conflict shortly after being released from prison. Her return to normal life was anything but smooth, as she had spent a significant part of the year behind bars after being wrongly accused of serious crimes, including human trafficking and a double murder. Although justice eventually prevailed and she was released earlier in the week, the emotional and psychological weight of everything she had endured continued to follow her every step. Coming back home should have felt like a relief, a moment of safety and familiarity after months of isolation, stress, and uncertainty. However, nothing in Moira's life felt the same anymore. The world she had left behind had shifted in ways she was still trying to understand and accept. One of the most significant changes was the loss of Butler's farm, a place deeply tied to her identity, her work, and her sense of belonging. She had controversially but reluctantly sold the farm to the Tates while she was still dealing with legal pressure and financial uncertainty. That decision, although made under difficult circumstances, continued to weigh heavily on her conscience. The situation became even more complicated when ownership of the farm changed hands again, with control eventually being passed on to Robert Sugden and Aaron Dingle. This chain of events left Moira feeling increasingly disconnected from what once felt like the center of her life. Butler's farm had never just been property to her. It had represented stability, family legacy, and a place where she believed she would always belong. Losing it left an emotional gap that she struggled to fill, even as she attempted to rebuild some sense of normality. Instead of returning to the familiar comfort of the farm, Moira now found herself living at Wishing Well Cottage. The change of environment was meant to offer a fresh start, but instead it highlighted how much had been disrupted. The cottage was already occupied by Sam, Lydia, and others, meaning Moira had to adjust to a shared living situation that came with its own rules, routines, and expectations. What might have seemed like a supportive family arrangement quickly turned into a source of tension as personalities clashed and boundaries were tested. In the latest episode of the ITV soap, Moira struggled to adapt to her new surroundings and the dynamics within the household. Small disagreements began to surface almost immediately, revealing underlying frustrations on all sides. While some of these moments had a comedic undertone, they also pointed to deeper issues of control, independence, and the difficulty of adjusting to life after trauma. One morning, Moira's patience was already wearing thin. She complained that Belle had taken far too long in the bathroom, disrupting the morning routine. Frustrated, and still trying to find her place in the household, she turned to Lydia and asked if she could use the bathroom next. Lydia calmly explained that there was a rota system in place to ensure fairness among everyone living in the house. For Moira, this was yet another reminder that she was no longer in control of her own environment. The idea of having to schedule basic daily routines felt restrictive and unfamiliar, triggering emotions linked to her time in prison. In a moment of dry frustration, she remarked that she had not realized she was still living under prison-like conditions. Although said partly in jest, the comment reflected her deeper sense of displacement and irritation at the lack of autonomy in her current life. Tension did not end there. Later, another disagreement arose when Lydia prepared a meal of rabbit stew for the household. Moira immediately expressed concern, pointing out that Isaac would refuse to eat it if peas were included. Lydia responded by explaining that she was simply trying to ensure Isaac had a balanced diet and was getting enough green vegetables. This seemingly small exchange quickly escalated into a more personal conflict. Moira felt that Lydia was overstepping boundaries by questioning her approach to parenting. Having already endured months of separation from her family while in prison, Moira was sensitive about her role as a mother and protective of her authority in that space. Lydia, on the other hand, was attempting to maintain structure and care within the household, but her intentions were interpreted as criticism. Feeling increasingly overwhelmed, Moira later opened up to Cain about the situation. Her frustration was evident as she tried to explain how tense things had become. She insisted that none of it was amusing and expressed concern that Lydia was undermining her parenting decisions. Moira also admitted that she felt constantly watched and judged, as though she had to carefully monitor her behavior in her own home. She explained that the constant need to adjust, compromise, and tiptoe around others was becoming exhausting. After everything she had already been through, she expected some level of understanding and space to recover. Instead, she felt like she was stepping into another environment where she had to defend her every action. While Moira was expressing her frustrations, Lydia happened to come downstairs and overheard part of the conversation. This added another layer of tension to an already fragile situation. Rather than easing the conflict, the timing of the overheard remarks only intensified the emotional strain between the two women. Moira, still speaking openly, admitted that she felt the household needed more personal space in order for everyone to live together peacefully. She emphasized that the lack of boundaries and constant proximity was contributing to growing resentment and misunderstandings. The situation escalated further when Lydia, clearly hurt and frustrated by the ongoing tension, responded sharply. In the heat of the moment, she questioned why Moira did not simply return to prison if living in the house was so unbearable. The comment struck a nerve, turning a domestic disagreement into a much deeper emotional wound. It highlighted just how fragile relationships within the household had become, and how quickly unresolved tension could erupt into harsh words. Cain, witnessing the growing conflict, became increasingly frustrated himself. Caught between loyalty to Moira and concern for his wider family, he urged her to be more considerate and patient with the people she was living with. From his perspective, the situation required compromise and understanding from all sides if it was going to work. However, Moira was already at her emotional limit. Feeling unsupported and misunderstood, she reacted by storming out of the house. Her departure was not just a physical exit, but also a reflection of her internal struggle to cope with the changes in her life. The sense of rejection, combined with lingering trauma from her time in prison and the loss of her home, left her feeling isolated and overwhelmed. As Moira walked away, the atmosphere within Wishing Well Cottage remained tense and unsettled. What had begun as small disagreements over routines and meals had now developed into a much deeper rift between members of the household. The possibility of a new feud emerging between Moira and Lydia now loomed over everyone, raising questions about whether the situation could be repaired or if it would continue to escalate. Cain was left in a difficult position, torn between supporting Moira and maintaining harmony within his own family. His frustration was clear, but so was his concern that the situation was spiraling out of control. The emotional strain on everyone involved suggested that reconciliation would not be easy, especially with so many unresolved feelings still simmering beneath the surface. As events continue to unfold, viewers are left wondering whether Moira and Cain will be able to repair the growing cracks in their relationship. More importantly, there is uncertainty about whether Moira will ever be able to fully adjust to her new living situation and rebuild a sense of stability after everything she has endured. The path forward appears uncertain, with trust, patience, and understanding all being put to the test in ways that may have lasting consequences for the entire household. Emmerdale airs on weekday evenings at 8 p.m. on ITV1 and is also available for streaming on ITVX.